Welcome to the Print Design Podcast, the show where we talk about all things print and packaging. We go behind the scenes with designers and talk about the print projects they designed that really rock their world. From file prep to holding the finished product in their hand and all the key decisions in between. So, let's talk ink on paper.
Mike, welcome to the Print Design Podcast, my friend. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. I'm excited to get into this. Thanks for being here, for joining me.
Yes. I'm all about print. I dream it. I sleep it. Or no, when I sleep, I dream it. I eat it. The smell of printer ink. I want to make that. I want to make that cologne. Like it would be super. I think the nerds. Would appreciate that.
I've always said, it'd be awesome to have like a print shop smelling candle. You
Yes.
light the candle in your house, your whole house smells like a print shop.
Ooh. Well, listen. When I first did UMBER, before I had my separate studio, my house was filled with magazines, and it smelled like print ink for like months. My son had to deal with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a son who's 10 now. At the time he was 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And when he come over, he would have to just like, oh, what's that smell? Oh, that's just, now he'll know, and it'll be a memory in his mind of that smell. So
that's print, son. That's what that is.
Yes, that's print, son.
I love that. I had back in my print sales days, I had this wedding magazine that I used to print, and the delivery instructions and date was so particular and so specific and so detailed. I thought, you know what? I'm not going to just throw this on a courier and send it out. I'm going to personally deliver this. But it was like 60 boxes. So I had a minivan at the time because I had 3 kids. So I just slammed all the seats into the floor and I filled the minivan, but I did it the night before because it was an early morning drop off.
Yeah,
man, when those things fresh off the press sat in the closed van all night.
Oh my
And then
God.
when I got in that van in the morning, let me tell you, holy.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, I feel like, is it like a high? I think it's a little bit of a high. I think a little bit of like your mind goes places.
It's a passion. That's what we'll label it as, Mike. It's a passion.
Yes. Well, I used to work at this print shop in Philly, and it was a print shop for architects. So we did blue lines with the ammonia smell, and it was ridiculous, dude. Like it smelled like ammonia, like it was toxic. I know it was, but I worked there and it was fine. Yeah.
It was toxic.
Passion.
I know it was.
I know it was, but I was
it
right
was a
there.
passion.
Yes.
That's awesome. Mike, I've loved the banter. I want to kick this over to you now, and I want you to just sort of tell us about yourself. Introduce us to Mike.
Yeah. So, Mike is, Mike is a creative. Mike is, he likes to call himself a nerd, even though that name resonates differently for different people. He's passionate about art and design and pencils. He always says I feel like we're talking about himself in third person.
I want to do that the whole episode. Third person.
He says pencils over pixels all day.
Yeah.
Like all day. And I think for me, coming from the background of drawing my whole life, and first going to school for illustrations, pencils is the key, and I put pencils to the same level as a computer or vice versa. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm an artist, I'm a father, I'm a designer, I'm a publisher now, and and I'm just really I'm passionate about what I believe in. And so yeah.
Beautiful. So I wanted just a little bit more context on like the artist illustrator you're drawing as a kid. You're getting creative. Was there, were your parents supportive of that? Did you grow up in a family of artists and designers? Did you have like an aunt that really pointed you in that direction, or how did that come about?
So my dad is an artist.
Awesome.
So him and my mom divorced when I was about 3 or 4 years old. So I just remember seeing him like paint and really paint
Mhm.
rather. And so he's from St. Vincent in the West Indies. So he comes from a Caribbean background influenced um, by Carnival and Calypso. So he would design the mask and the costumes for the Carnival, like the whole,
Yeah.
whether it's like a huge, well, I think they call it, I believe it's called a mass leader or mass head, where the mass is the group of people who are walking down with the music and the costumes. Like he was
Mhm.
the head of that, and then he 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 went to Cooper Union in New York for art school, and
Mhm.
that's where he met my mom in Brooklyn, and so they had me move to Charlotte. They divorced, but I would say that my even though I didn't grow up with them, that desire to create is definitely, I would say, is spawned by him. But I would say that my
Yeah.
hustle and my passion and my driving force is all my mom.
Mhm.
But as a kid, I just always drew. I just drew all the time, and one of the things I remember drawing a lot of is graffiti, because I was a fan of hip hop from day. Like I would say, hip hop is part of the main inspiration my for my career as an artist, because with hip hop, I I literally felt like I understood all four elements of hip hop from day one. I never thought the rap was something different from graffiti
Mhm.
or breakdancing or from DJing. All of those four elements I knew from jump what they were. So my love for fonts and typography was inspired by graffiti,
Mhm.
right? And then just looking at the album artwork and having roots in New York, a lot of my family members and cousins would come down from New York to visit us in the South, and they would always have their graffiti books, whatever. And so yes, I would say that's where the passion for just drawing started, at an early age.
Yeah, so I'm seeing these dots connect here. And so was it like art school, like all the way, like that was the direction, there was no question? Or did you try something different before going, nah, man, I had it right the first time, it was art?
I So it's funny, like my mom, she was supportive of me, but she didn't like make she didn't uh she didn't make sure I went to art camps, or she didn't make sure I went to art, lessons. She just like let me just do my thing.
Mhm.
Um and so I knew I wanted to be an artist. I mean, at one point I wanted to play in the NBA like all kids do. And I remember my senior year, like, so I rode the bench from junior high to to high school. And my senior year, I was like, you know what? Do I want to ride the bench, or do I want to just really just focus on this artist thing? And so on this artist thing, I was like, you know what? I'm an artist. I'm not a basketball player by any means. I mean, I had a decent jump shot, but that was it.
Mhm.
And so I knew from that point on, I knew I was going to be an artist. I didn't know what kind, right? And then when it was, I believe, 11th grade, a representative from the Art Institute of Atlanta, it came to our, I think it was my art school, or
Mhm.
excuse me, art class, and he was talking about graphic illustration, graphic design. I'm like, oh, that sounds like something that I've always done, because even as a kid, I would design like sneakers, motorcycles. I would draw comic books, excuse me, comic characters like Calvin and Hobbes and
Yeah, yeah.
Garfield and Snoopy, and I would redraw all of the back then.
Mhm.
That during that time, college teams were like hot, right? And
Mhm.
so I would always draw like the Jayhawks and the Orangemen and the Buckeyes, I would take their mascots and make it into like a cartoon, you know. And so anyway, so I've always drew that way. And then when the guy had spoke from the school, was like, oh, that sounds like, oh, you can get paid for this? Okay, bet. That's what I'm going to do. And that's how it kind of started in terms of, I knew from that point on, it was illustration first, not design, just illustration first.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
So sort of sticking back in time in the history here, what is your earliest memory of printer packaging?
Highlights for children.
My kids get highlights.
Listen, I still have it. I still have the one from 1982. And if we were on video, I would have showed you this because I have it in my hand.
Yeah.
And my son is now reading this.
You got to send me pictures then.
He reads this like this is a hardcover back then. This was hardcover.
Yeah.
And so the one I'm holding right now is April 1982. So this is my first memory of things printed, and it was activities. You know, you have to draw things. You have to like find the missing object within the artwork, and yeah, man, like it was this. And then after this, it was Cycle World because I was into motorcycles. So those were the two I'll say I was like start with, and then as a fan of hip hop and as a teenager, it was Source Magazine was the one, and then Vibe. That Vibe magazine was the start for my passion for print media in terms of magazines. Vibe was it. You know, I remember a senior year in high school in '93. I believe the Vibe came out around that time, and on the cover was Snoop Dogg. And I always tell the story, like on the cover, the font was probably like a condensed Helvetica or maybe even grotesque, one of those fonts. Yeah. And it said "Bow Wow Wow," and I was like, oh. And Vibe was different back then. That was the first, at least for hip hop culture and for Black culture, that was the first magazine I saw that was really kind of art driven, where black and white photos. The format was bigger than most magazines. It just looks very, very artsy. That was it.
That's awesome. So I just did like a really quick like Google here, and I wanted you to see this. Hopefully this doesn't like crash the call.
Yep, that's it.
That's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna move it out so we don't lose the call here. But that's the one.
It.
That's the magazine.
That's the one.
Yeah, 100%. I know. I basically pictured this, Googled it, and there it was.
Yes, that was the one. And so, but still, once again, I knew I was going to be, you know. Oh, and then around that same time is when my shop teacher, my first design teacher was my shop teacher. Mr. Lacey. Mr. Lacey. This is what he did. He said, okay, hey class, there's this new thing we have here. It's called electronic mail, right? Yeah. And we were like, what's that? It's like, you know, you could send messages over the internet, over the computer. I don't think it was called internet back then. You could send messages over the computer through phone lines, and then we have to design our business cards. That was a part of the class, right? And so, wow, that's crazy. Mr. Lacey, that's Lord of mercy. He was my first design teacher. So we designed these business cards, and at the time I had this crazy afro. So I drew a silhouette of my afro with me, and on there said graphic illustrator. So this is 93, dude. This is 93. So
you put your stamp on it in 93.
93. Lord have mercy, man.
Mr. Lacey, shout out Mr. Lacey.
Yes, Lacey.
Oh, awesome, Mike. Okay, so fast forwarding time a little bit here. What about recently? Have you had any recent interactions with print and packaging that either really surprised you or you really enjoyed?
Before the pandemic, me and my son will always go record shopping, right? And we will we would always buy old vinyl, and whether it's R&B or pop music or jazz, some hip hop, but like the old school hip hop.
Mhm.
And because we're not going shopping for records, I started like buying new records. And there's this new album by this, I forgot his last name, but his first name is Ambrose. He's a trumpet player on the Blue Note label, and the image of him is really a beautiful image of him, like his stark black and white,
Mhm.
really simple and clean. And usually for Blue Note, their label is always that weird, that kind of that right angle and blue, that blue color. This time it's black, right? Because the artwork of the cover is black and white, and the weight of the vinyl, the weight of it is different from. You could tell that this was like quality vinyl plastic,
Mhm.
right? But the simplicity of this vinyl design, this layout, and the packaging of it, it just was beautiful. Um, and they use Optima. Nobody uses. Listen, I love Optima. I really, really, truly do. I wish I could use it more. But some aspects of it I don't like as a font. But they use Optima, and it was beautiful how they used it. And so that one surprised me. I didn't see that coming. And so for me, the packaging, print packaging is all about the reveal, the taking off the plastic, the shrink wrap, and then you're
Mhm.
opening up the the fold, but it's kind of like sticky because it's been like pressed so hard with the shrink wrap, and
Mhm.
the reveal is the best thing ever. So yeah, man.
Man, just with the combination of, records being nostalgic, but also, some of the really cool experiences that you can create with them, tie that into, me having a podcast here. I want to create a record and send it out somehow. I don't know what it looks like yet. I don't know the sort of the purpose of the piece yet. I don't know the distribution of the piece yet, but at some point I want to create a vinyl record, just the large canvas of the record sleeve,
Yes,
the
yes.
idea of like tucking in a giant oversized brochure inside of that with
Hmm.
with the artwork and the experience and even more stuff to it, like that kind of stuff I want to create.
Yeah, man. So one of our publications, so we have Umber, which is the main graphic journal, the art book I call
Mhm.
it, and then we
Mhm.
have the BBP digest, which is more of like a small like format. It's not a small format in size, but in terms of the amount of pages. And a lot of times I produce those just because at the time the amount of energy it takes to make Umber took me a long time. So, all right, let me give you a mixtape. So BBP digest is our visual mixtape, right? And so
I love that.
the last one we did, well, we featured a hip hop group um, called Souls of Mischief,
Mhm.
which is going back to high school. They're from the Bay Area, and they were really like popular. The song that they're most known for is 93 Till Infinity. And so as a kid in Charlotte, growing up, I was the only one really playing their music, right? Everybody else was playing other regional music or music from the either the South or New York.
Uh,
I was playing Soldier Mischief from the Bay Area. I got a chance to interview them the end of 2018,
mhm.
excuse me, 19, and it was a blessing for me to like listen to their music, and now I'm sitting in front of them. Anyway, long story short, I made that version of BBP the size of a vinyl record, and
Love it.
we did some hand printing vinyl sleeves with the hole in it, of like an Umber graphic on the front, and then we had so we treated the BBP as an insert. And so if I had all the money in the world, a record would have been included in that as well. You know
For
what I'm saying? And
sure.
so with some rare, my goal was to find rare, like define, okay, this is my vision. This is my vision to all of the records that they sampled from their album,
Yep.
have it inside of that vinyl case,
Wow.
right? but the pandemic happened. I couldn't shop for it, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll probably find it cheaper if I go to like a mom and pop record store versus trying to go to like Discogs or these places where they charge you way too much money for records, in my opinion, for used records, And so anyway, that was a plan, that was a vision. But I feel you with just making it. Dude, you can make a vinyl record of just sounds of just like birds chirping, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
All for the but it's all for the packaging. That's what it's for.
It's the experience.
Yes.
Same with like the other one that's like from my childhood is a VHS cassette, like VHS tape, and the packaging for VHS and just how cool and retro that is.
Yes.
There's the actor Seth Rogen. He launched a cannabis line with somebody. Oh, why can't I remember the name? Houseplant. There it is. Okay. Houseplant. If you haven't seen the packaging for Houseplant cannabis, it's so retro vibe. They've got like I think their pre-rolls, they don't open like a cigarette pack. I think they open like a mini VHS tape. Ooh. Like it's all like really, really cool retro packaging. And I'm absolutely in love with it all.
So I'm going out on a limb here. I'm thinking you are Gen X from that era.
No, I am. I think I'm on the like tail end of millennial.
Okay.
I'm like just a millennial.
Because all the stuff that you're saying, whatever, there's this way to where that generation or my generation still find ways to be relevant, but harken back to the nostalgia for when they grew up.
Yep.
Right. There's this weird like way to where like there's, not all of them, not all Gen X people are doing this, but the creative ones or the ones who are really thinking outside the box find way to kind of harken back to that time of their innocence, and still make it relevant for people to appreciate now. And I feel like we're in this space of like, for millennials or even Gen Z to where folks who are Gen Z can appreciate some element. They can appreciate that, right? They can kind of like, they can understand that feeling, so
yeah. And I made this post recently on my Instagram, and I basically just in big bold font, kind of like a carousel, asked people, just saying that print brings back memories. What are some of the nostalgic memories that print brings back for you? And you get like hockey cards, baseball cards. The one I put up there for me is Pogs. Do you remember Pogs?
Wait a second. Do I? No.
Pogs were like those little milk caps that were printed. There's all kinds of different designs for them. There's hockey teams, just these little paperboard circles. And then they made slammers for them in the game of Pogs. Look it up after it. I'm sure you'll. Okay. It swept the world, but for me, it swept grade 4. But that's like just an example of like when I see something that rimmels that, I'm like, oh, that looks like Pogs. And then I spend the next couple hours looking on eBay, like buying Pog sets. And it's like, just get sucked back into that. Like print has that power to pull you back into a specific moment. So I just love it for that reason. Again, I want to kick this sort of back into history here with this next one. What was the first print project that you were a part of? Was that your Afro business card?
So let me think. Actually, so there was when I lived my first project where I, as an entrepreneur, I feel like that I've done within print. This is more in the side of apparel. So I lived in Atlanta. Went to the Art Institute of Atlanta. I moved there in '94. Graduated in '96. I stayed there for another year. So in Atlanta, there was this event or this party that was called Freaknik, and it was really the party was focused on the kids who went to HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And so there would have all these Black folks coming from around the nation to Atlanta and just party, right? And I grew up in the South. My mom was strict. I was not a party. It was too much for me. I was very green back then. I was like, I can't party like this. I don't know what's going on here, right? This is too much for me. Just fearing that my mom would show up out of nowhere and saying, "Boy, what you doing?" So I'm like, let me just not. But it's like, how can I participate in this event? So I got my an associate degree for illustration. I'm like, all right, well, what if I design a T-shirt for Freaknik? And because back then people would design these T-shirts, and this is a party scene, right? And so unfortunately, a lot of times when people are highlighting a party, but they're highlighting women in a way that's not really nice. You know what I'm saying? Like the bikinis on, and back then it was Daisy Dukes, which is really short jean shorts. I was like, so what if I was to make one that was really kind of classy? And so I made this T-shirt design. I got it printed. I did all the illustration by hand. Then I went into Illustrator and made the graphics of it. Got it printed, and then I remember the first time I sold a T-shirt was at this barbershop. This is the last time I got a haircut. At that time for the next like 5.
I'm glad you added that at that time.
Yeah, at that time, because I had dreadlocks.
Bro, I saw you before you.
Yeah, I had dreadlocks for like 7 years. Yeah. After that, anyway, so we're in the barbershop, right? And I'm selling my T-shirt to the barber who just cut my hair. Somebody else had a T-shirt too, and we were both comparing. He was like, "Well, I like his because his is classy. His looks different." So that was the first time I kind of like did my first print project and was kind of competing against this other guy who had the T-shirt too. And so I sold out all the T-shirts that day, that weekend. So that was my first time really being able to participate in this event that I felt usually overwhelming with, but I'm showing up, I'm taking up space the way that how I am and how I kind of, move in the world is through art. And so let me participate in this event that is normally overwhelming, but through my art and feel like comfortable, you know what I'm saying? And just being me, being authentic. So that was my first, I would say, print project that really kind of like got going.
Love that. I really hope you have pictures of that.
I was on the news, man. I was on the news, like ABC, some local news or ABC, whatever. And so in Atlanta, there's 3 Black colleges like in the same area, and it's called the AUC, Atlanta University of Colleges. So it's like 3 colleges, and this is where kind of everybody's kind of hanging out. My cousin went to Morehouse, which is I would say probably one of the most. I would say that I don't know if the most, but it was one of the colleges. So I'm just there kicking it, selling my T-shirts. This guy happened to have a boombox, like old school 80s hip hop, had a boombox playing. Yeah. And the news guy came up. He was like, "Oh, what do you have here?" I was like, "Oh, I got my T-shirt for Freaknik." And then he was like, "Oh, here we go, people. We have the unofficial T-shirt for Freaknik." I was like, "Yes." So my mom has a last T-shirt. This is like 25 something years ago. She has a last T-shirt. She still has it. So
does she wear it? She go out like giving props?
No, she's not doing that. She just like it's somewhere in the closet somewhere with dust, but she still has it. So
oh man, that's so cool.
Yes.
Mike, I really want to get into a deep dive on your magazine on UMBER here, but before I do, the last question I want to go by is, what makes print so special to designers? What do you think they love most about it?
I think there's a form of discovery, I believe, we're print designer, like the reveal that we talked about before with the with records and record sleeves, nostalgia once again too, and I think so. I'm in Oakland, in Oakland, California, in the Bay Area, right? And so the Bay Area, definitely, in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, it's all about digital and product design and apps, and I'm really slow with all of that stuff. But what I tend to find out is that when people find out about UMBER and they get it, it's a it's a break from online, right? It's like, I need to I love I love this, and there's something about it just is taking me away from being on computer all the time, and particularly in the pandemic, like we're on screens way more than we were before, right? And in 9 times out of 10, you're probably on your laptop more than you were before as well. And so I just think it's the playfulness of that you can do with print, and the touch, the feel. It kind of, there's a way to where it kind of makes you feel young again. I feel like, like it kind of takes you back to that moment when you're reading highlights for children or reading these comic books as a kid. So I think for designers, I think print is this space that almost like, well, I wish I could do that. I always get that from people. I wish I could just do print design. I wish it's a break from just the monotony of of being online all the time.
Oh, for sure. But like, especially now, like there's massive screen fatigue. You just get tired. Like, how many times can you refresh your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed before you just go, okay, I got to put this thing down?
And the infinite scrolling. It just never stops.
And when you put it down, you're in search of some sort of analog fulfillment of some kind, whether that's going outside for a walk or getting out in nature, or getting your hands and cooking something, making something from scratch, or grabbing a book or a magazine and sitting down and just consuming, but in an analog format. That is sought after so much. And one of the things I'm on right now is, especially during this pandemic time where people are spending more time on screens, nobody's printing big catalogs and filling your mailbox with it. Like right now, if a company was doing direct mail right, they would be crushing it. Just because you have so much desire for experiences, analog experiences. People are checking their mail and looking for something other than bills. And, you get this mail. And it's like this unique experience. Maybe it feels different. Maybe it smells different. Maybe you got to scratch something off, or maybe there's a pull tab to create some sort of engagement with it that drives to some sort of online, whether it's an online e-commerce site or somebody just want, online consumption of something. That connection is like the opportunities are endless right now.
And that's a great segue to the future of UMBER.
Absolutely, man. So like the reason that we got connected is I came across UMBER through social media one night, and I thought, this magazine looks awesome and there's a purpose behind it. So I really wanted to connect with you on where the idea came from, where the name came from, just the whole idea behind this, with the question of why print and how did you craft this experience? Like, why the paper choices? Why did you select these finishes? What was the goal, and how does it align with the brand? So I know that was a lot of questions, but I mean, we're going to just kind of cover it in conversation. So let's start with, like, what is UMBER and where did the idea come from and how did you name it?
So I'll give you the definition of UMBER. UMBER means brown pigment from the earth. That's just, that's just it, kind of like simple and plain. So coming from an illustrator background, when I'm drawing, I love drawing faces and profiles and portraits. And so I'm always using, at the time, my main medium is pencil. And right now it's graphite pencil was the main medium, but back then it was all Prismacolor pencils, right? And then one of these pencils I would use a lot is UMBER, right? Raw UMBER, burnt UMBER, raw sienna, terracotta, goldenrod, all these colors for the tone. And so I went to school for design in 97, graduated in 99. And when I was in school for design in Chicago, I went to the Illinois Institute of Art in Chicago. My teacher, I went to school for design because it was hard for me to get a job as an illustrator, because back then you either were freelance or you worked at a newspaper. And people who had those jobs in newspapers don't give those up. And so I feel like I was too young to really try to do freelance. So I said, let me just do let me go back to school for graphic design. Went to school for design. My type design teacher was a fanatic for this magazine called Immigrate. Immigrate started in 1984. Husband and wife team. Husband was the graphic designer with the layout artist. The wife was the font designer, and so they met at school in the Bay Area. They started this magazine for fun, and then she started to design fonts on the Macintosh. She was the first one to really to embrace computers for layout and for font design. And so at some point, people were really fascinated by her. They're fascinated by her fonts, and they wanted to buy her fonts. Basically, fonts funded the magazine. The fonts got so popular. She would design it, save it on the floppy disk, and then ship it to people, right? And so really that was and so fast forward, my teacher in school was like all about Immigrate. He was like, Immigrate is the best magazine, and the beautiful fonts, layout, and I loved it, right? But at the time where I got into Immigrate, one, I didn't have the money to buy Immigrate, and two, the style that I liked the most, those magazines were already sold out. By this time in the late 90s, they were experimenting with different layout and design, whatever. So becoming a fan of Immigrate in the late 90s and also in 2000, there's a magazine called Good Magazine, which came out, right? And I still got the first issue. And Good Magazine is, I mean, it's not like Immigrate. Immigrate is definitely high concept, high art, a lot of grunge and a lot of distortion, but really fonts and layout was the main focus of it. It was like the main look and feel with typefaces. And so, at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm geeking about layout now. Like I love Helvetica from like, not just from I'm a designer. I love Helvetica from a very personal standpoint, and we can talk about that later. But like Helvetica means a lot to me on the personal level, to the point where I was going to move to Switzerland because of Helvetica. In '05, my dad, who I mentioned earlier, he has family in London, so I went to visit my aunt for the first time, his sister. I said, cool, I'm going to visit you, but I'm going to Switzerland too, just to check it out. So I was going to move to Switzerland because of Helvetica to Basel. That's like, who does that? You know what I'm saying? Like, well, listen, what black man does that, right? What black dude's going to be like, I'm moving to Switzerland because of Helvetica. 1957, Max Menninger did his thing. I want to move there because of that. So anyway, I'm loving this because this is it's taking my love for illustration and applying it, the puzzle pieces, the layout. I just was a fiend about layout. So I was like, what if I, in my love for print magazines and just print media, I never saw me in print media, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you would see black and brown folks in print media, but never like, it's kind of spotty. You know what I'm saying? It's always like, it's the black and brown folks who are like the people who are doing the magazine. Right. You know what I'm saying? Never the nuances are, this black guy, he's really into designing fonts. I'm going to put him in a magazine, or or she's really into, making these things that we like. We're going to put her in a magazine. Right. And so I said, what if I did a black version of Immigrate? What would that look like? What would that look like for me to do a print magazine like Immigrate? Not just talking about black stories of black people, but stories of all people of color, but from the perspective of a black man, right? That was like my original thought, whatever. So this is now, I'm fast forward now, this is 05, 06 is where this idea is starting to come about. So I'm in Philadelphia, 1-bedroom apartment near downtown Philly. And I'm like, okay, this is after I came back from Switzerland. I went to Switzerland in 05, right? So now 06, I'm back in Philly, and I just went to Switzerland for like 4 or 5 days. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, what if I did my version of Immigrate? What would it look like? What would I talk about? So in 06 is when the concept of UMBER came about. And so once again, going back to my experience as an artist as an illustrator, I'm like, well, umber, that sounds kind of cool. Oh, it's brown pigment from the earth. Oh, that's fresh, right? That's nice, right? And
Yeah, I
then
didn't even know that.
and then even in '06, I knew it was going to be printed in black and brown ink. Oh, black and brown perspectives, like black. The tagline for umber always been the tagline was the Creative Thinkers Graphic Journal.
Okay.
That's what I wanted it to be. And my vision was that. So I'm thinking too is okay, right? There's all these great magazines out there, and they're mostly white people or some people of color, but just here and there, right?
Mhm.
I'm not saying that they are exclusively trying to make a white magazine. They're just rocking with their people. They're just bringing the people who they know on the personal level. So I want Umber to be, you see this beautiful magazine, and then you realize, oh, wait a second, it's only black and brown people. Not like leading in with black and brown people, this like, no, you find that out just because as you're reading it, that's the focus, that's the intention behind it. And so that was so this is '06. All this was in '06. This is before, this is before Facebook, think maybe just came out around that time, '06, '07, around. So there was no Twitter yet. There was no Instagram. There was none of these things, right?
No.
And even the space within print media during that time, Immigrant was on his way out. Immigrant lasted, I think their last issue was around '06, '07.
Okay.
They're wrapping down. And by this time, Raygun wasn't as popular. Raygun was this print magazine designed by David Carson. There's a magazine called Nest, which was out about about furniture and decor. That was kind of on this way. So all of these print magazines are now on their way down because internet is starting to kick in and websites. So so this is where Umber starts in '06. That's where the concept comes about. And then a year later, I moved to the Bay Area. I had a son, and then in 2012 is when I made a prototype of Umber. So 6 years after the concept, the idea, 6 years later, I make a prototype, and I made about 100 copies. Nothing, not a lot. About 25 pages, because I was like, let me just see if I can make it.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I can just do it.
And at this point, you designed it all yourself.
Yeah. Dude, I got the content from Wikipedia.
Beautiful.
All my content was from Wikipedia. I did all the illustrations. I found a photographer, this really beautiful photographer here in Oakland. She did all the photography on that. I had one person write a story. But other than that, all the content was just, I wrote some stories. I have great ideas, but I ain't no writer like that. And yeah, but and all the other content was from Wikipedia, right? And so I said, let me just make this thing. And so that was in 12. That was almost 10 years ago now. That was 9 years ago now.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
10 years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. That's the origin story. And it's just like the brain started turning in Switzerland. I love the part about Switzerland. So about 6 years ago or 9 years ago now. Sorry, you were saying you create this sort of mini version of it.
Yep.
Where does that take you? Does it prove concept? Does it make you want to go a step further? Like, at what point do you go full scale? Like, what are the signs that you see? Like, yeah, this is good. This is good.
So no, the sign there was. I mean, people. Oh, this is cool. People like it. I'm really showing it to friends and family. I was trying to get. There's this one editor. She at the time she was working for Huffington's Post Black Voices.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I was like, all right, let me send it to her. She was like, okay, where's your budget? She just like, I real talk, I cried because she just like, where's your budget? Talk to me. You got a budget? I can't do it for $400. She just like, everyone wants to do a magazine. You're not special. Basically, what she said.
Yeah,
dude, that's
a crushing moment.
I was pissed, man. I was like in my and I was working at my job at the time in Mountain View, I'm in my car. I'm just like crying. I'm like, she don't, I forget her, man. I was very careful. I didn't call her any out of her name. I was very, respectful, but still just like, how dare she talk? She doesn't. But it's like, but she's right. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know this dude. I don't know where he's coming from. Like, idea sounds cool, but everybody has an idea, right? And so I really didn't get too much confirmation really on
Yeah,
it,
and
right?
and those are the moments, when something like that happens, especially when you're fired up about something that you like poured your heart into and worked so hard onto, and you get like a dose of reality. This is where like the market never cares how hard you worked on
Yep,
something.
yep.
Is it good? Is it viable? Does it work?
But here's the thing, though, Dave, is that it made me feel like I didn't do anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
It made me feel like I didn't do a damn. I didn't do a damn thing yet. I didn't
Yep.
do any. What you do? What, you just had this little concept, 6 years ago, and now you have
Mm-hmm.
this. Like, it wasn't. If it didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was in 12. And then years go by. Life happens. Being a dad, working. I was doing like freelance work at the time, but still had my full time job.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2016, I just had this breakup with a serious girlfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and then Trump got elected,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? I'm not. I've never been I'm not a protester. I'm not a very vocal. I'm not that guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a protester in that sense. But I know that making art is a form of protest for sure. I'm
Yes,
clear about that.
absolutely.
And so I was like, what am I going to do? People doing all this yipping and yapping about Trump and yada yada. I'm like, because sometimes when things like this happen, you have to look personally within and see what you can do for yourself versus you're trying to like, let me try to react directly into what he represents. For me, that's the wrong thing to do. What are you going to do for yourself? How are you going to show up? How are you going to take a space that is authentically you
Mm-hmm.
and get support from your community and really kind of lean into what you believe in?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was like, oh, the idea I have for UMBER, now is the time.
Yeah.
Now is the time to do it.
So there it is. So the dots connect, something ticks and goes, yeah, this is it. This is the time.
This is the time to do it. And so, because one of the things, and at the time, Issa Rae, the actor who does who has Insecure, she had this before that. She had this web series called Awkward Black Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I don't know if it's still up there, but it's great. It's basically is Insecure without the money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but one of the things she said when she made that is that she worked with her community. Like my friends, like, you want to be in this little this web series I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
Let me get you. So when I did UMBER, I was like, and since I moved to Oakland, I met some amazing people who are really, really super dope. Not all have to be designers and creatives or visual artists, but they're really good people. I need to get you in my magazine. Because that's really how it started with my community of artists and thinkers who I've became friends with since moving to Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the first of 17, we all sat down in my little apartment. It's like, all right, I got this idea, I got to make it happen. What should I do? And then, I heard of Kickstarter at this point. I knew about it. And I feel like, well, that's maybe how I can really do it. Right. And so then, those 4 people end up helping me. Like 2 of those people actually were part of the first issue in terms of features. The other
Mm-hmm.
one, they just helped out with the campaign and stuff. And so I did a Kickstarter campaign.
Kickstarter campaign and successful, obviously.
Yeah. I got so I did a Kickstarter campaign while I'm a full-time job. I still had to design the magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I still had to illustrate it. I still had to curate it. I still have to figure out what the printing is going to be.
Yep.
I still have to figure out where it's going to be sold, who's going to buy it,
yeah,
how am I going to sell it.
Yeah, that's that part where it's, how do I turn this into a business? Like I did this mini thing a number of years ago. Now it's time to scale up. So what did you ask for the Kickstarter campaign, and how did you figure out how much money you needed to raise to really pull it off?
The goal was $10,000 was what I asked for. I can't remember if I got a quote from the printer or not. I think I got a quote from the printer, and this is a local printer here in Oakland. And I was aware of their work because a friend of mine who's also a graphic designer, he got some stuff printed with them too. And they said, "Yeah, Mike, use them." And so Solstice Press was the printer. And so then I was like, okay, this is, I'm asking for 10,000. I got a quote from, I forgot how much the quote was. But it was a lot, a lot compared to like not knowing that. And mind you, when I came up with the cost for 10,000, I didn't think about fulfillment.
Yep.
I didn't think about shipping. I didn't think about packaging. I didn't think about the other perks that is non-related to the actual magazine itself. To all these things where I didn't have a focus group on the perks. I just like, let me just try this. I think it was one Kickstarter I looked at. It was called Hardcover.
Okay.
It was this print magazine, hardcover magazine that was created by this husband and wife, another husband and wife team. Her name is Danielle Smith, and her husband is Elliot Wilson. Both of them are journalists from hip hop, and so Danielle Smith used to be the editor for Vibe magazine, right? Elliot Wilson used to be the editor for Double XL hip hop magazine. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is the blueprint. This is what I'm going to pattern my Kickstarter off of their Kickstarter. Right. And so that's kind of how it was. And then got the funding and got it printed. And yeah, man. And but before that though, what I used to do is that I had a prototype of the first issue, just like printed at Kinko's, well, we're FedEx office now. And I went around to different like magazine stores or bookshops showing my prototype. Hey, would you sell something like this? Literally went in there. And then when they weren't looking, I would put the magazine in the shelf and take a picture of it. Just to put it out in the universe. Just to like,
dude, that is the hustle.
Let me just put out in the universe. And so I did that. And so like, all right, I'm getting some love in Oakland because people know Mike, if we like people know Oakland is a small community, particularly a community of Black and brown folks who are creatives and entrepreneurs. Like it's not a lot of us here, so we're all kind of know each other. So everybody was giving me love. Oh, Mike, we'll support you. I was like, all right, well, I gotta see how this is gonna go in LA. I don't have no community in LA. I have a couple of friends who are artists down there, but that's it. Took that same prototype during the campaign. And I drove down to LA and went to every shop I can think of. I went to magazine stores, bookstores, boutique shops, all over the place. Did the exact same thing. And the feedback was this is cool. Like, this is working. I think people are liking this. You know what I'm saying? Like this may mean something. And then so I think I did all of that to get it going. And then the campaign happened. I got the funding, got it printed, and it was
so awesome.
Yeah, man. It's yeah.
I love the hustle and the vibe you're putting out there. Just the energy you're putting out there by going into these different bookstores, putting it there, kind of giving it like a little wink, and be like, "Yeah, you'll be here soon." Taking a picture of it and moving on, and using that not only for motivation for yourself, but also for just putting that vibe out there. But sharing, you could share those photos and use that as in like, here we are in the bookstores. It just makes it look that much more legitimate, really, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to.
Well, here's the thing, though, Dave, is that it was about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the first issue we did of UMBER the theme was on vulnerability, right? That was the theme, right? As artists, we as creatives, we have to be vulnerable. Like, so check it. I'm doing a Kickstarter campaign based on the art that I love. You know what I'm saying? So I'm showing myself that way. I'm asking you for money, right? And I'm throwing out there like, this is concept I have that's dear to me, of my baby, right? Like, can you fund my baby? You know what I'm saying? Like, can you fund my son? Can you help him go to this thing and, you know, whatever. So it's really more so about that. And so the recognition or the validation was definitely, you know, but validation was like the people kind of like saying, yeah, Mike, keep going. Right. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, you know, once you have validation from your community, then you take all those people with you when you go to these other places. Like, it's not just me, it's the community of people that we've built, you know what I'm saying? So as much as my joy is designing the magazine and doing all the layout, but it's really about the stories, the discovery of people who are really creative and unique and different and doing things kind of on a different vibe. It was really about that. Their stories were probably more important than my story, but my story was like the driving force. But after you get past me, no, yo, look at the magazine, check her out, check him out. It really, that's what you really should be looking at as well too. So
I love that. So I want to just for a minute here shift over to like the production and creation of this actual publication, because whenever you're creating packaging or a magazine, you know, it's got its own brand. It's representing a brand. So you know, when you've got UMBER and there's purpose and meaning behind what you're trying to create, there's art behind it. There's, you know, your soul behind it, like your passion behind it. How do you translate that to a paper stock, a production size, like full color, or are we adding like, you know, highlights of neons or things like that throughout this? Like how do you translate that into actual production, something you hold in your hand?
Yeah. So first thing for UMBER, before anything, I make a vision board. The vision board gives me before the vision board is the theme, right? Once I have the theme, then I base my design off of that theme, and I curate based off of that theme as well. And so, for me, I had to pick themes for UMBER because if I feel like I did, I'll just be all over the place.
Yep.
Right. And you know, let's be real. Like, you know, Black and Brown, our community, where you know, there's a sense of vulnerability with that too, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, people either taking our stories and narratives and they are presenting our stories and narratives, but they don't really have us really in mind when they're doing that. They're just, hey, this is kind of cool. Look at this person doing that. You know what I'm saying? And so really the curation process is me figuring, okay, this is the theme. How do I want to tell this narrative in this story? Right. And in the space of using Black and Brown ink, right? How far can I push two colors?
Yep.
Is limiting me in one space, but it's a challenge and liberating in another space. Well, I don't have to worry about cyan. I ain't gotta worry about this spot color. I ain't gotta worry about this Pantone. I don't have to worry about. I just know that Black and Brown. I get some dual tones. I get some sepias. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I get some grayscale. I get some pure black. Let me see how much I can do with that, whatever. And so really then that becomes a part of the narrative of the story of making UMBER is the Black. So when I say the Black and Brown perspective, it's two things. Black and Brown perspective, meaning that Black and Brown representation of Black people, Indigenous people, Latin Americans, and marginalized people of color from around the world. That's one aspect, and it's printed in Black and Brown ink, right? So that's really what it was. It was really about Black and Brown ink first, and then the folks of color you notice, right? But then at some point I switched the narrative so people know that no, this is kind of, it's for everybody, but it's our perspective.
Yeah.
And so really it's curation of the content. Pick a theme, make a vision board based on that theme, then you curate to see who fits within this theme, who are about that theme, right? And the themes are usually kind of wide in scope. Like vulnerability, you can go a lot of places with that. Our second issue was on relationships. You can go a lot of places with that. And once I figure out what the narrative is and the flow is, I do a page mapping. Page mapping is basically, before I touch the computer, before I design it, I have to see where everything is going to go based on the stories I curated. So as you're reading through UMBER, there's a flow, there's a narrative, there's an arc, there's a low, there's a peak, there's all these valleys that are happening within the layout. And I treat every layout with its own design, but what unifies them is only black and brown ink. Mm-hmm. So every layout is an artwork in itself you can frame. That's my intentionality when I actually make the design. So once I come up with the page mapping, all right, printer, this is how many pages I got. This is the type of fold for this. I want to do a fold out in the middle of it. So I got to make sure that, there is 48 pages before the fold out and 48 pages after the fold out. Because if I don't get in a certain place, it's going to cost more money because I got to fold it. Like,
where the signatures go.
Yes. Right. And so all of that is part of the narrative too. All that's just as important as when that fold out is, right? Because you don't want to do it too early. You didn't want to do it too late. You want to do it when people are like, oh man, what? Oh
yeah. So you're taking like the production necessities, the things that, and not a lot of graphic designers know that stuff unless they're in the print game. They got a good relationship with the printer. They've either been through it before or something like that. But I mean, thinking through the process of, you're not just going to throw a fold out anywhere. There's a cost-effective place to put it. And incorporating that, positioning, where it has to be based on production, and mapping that out in the design, knowing that you want to build a story up to that moment.
Yeah. And so what was so interesting is that, so when I sent the first issue to the printer, and the first issue was like maybe 64 pages, not that big enough, for the first issue, and I think it was the production guy. It's not the guy who's on the floor with the printer, but it's the guy who reviews it before it goes to the printer, like before they make the plate. I forgot what his role is.
Yeah, and, your production manager.
Yeah, your production manager.
Press manager.
Yeah. He was like, like Mike, this, I'm pat myself on the back here a little bit, but he was like, wow, Mike, you did a good job. Like there was some things like you nailed it. Like we don't get files this clean. Is basically what he said.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, because I want to be a journeyman, I can tell you that back when I lived in Philly, when I worked at that print shop in Philadelphia, I want to be a journeyman. I want to learn how to print. I want to go on the press. I want to learn this thing. I want to be a part of the, but there's a whole, it's not just something you can just hop in, so you have to start that way early. I feel like in your career, to do that, you know what I'm saying? So there's a whole, it takes probably 8 years before you can get on that big machine where you're actually doing the print, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm trying to impress them, right? I'm trying to get my trapping right. I'm trying to get, the gutter right. I'm trying to impress the contributors because they trust me with their vision, with their stories, their vulnerability. I gotta make it look. My only thing is that, listen, you tell your story. My only thing is that it's gonna be black and brown ink, and it has to fit this theme. Other than that, please go have it, right? So I'm trying to impress them. I'm trying to make sure the printer gets what they need because I don't want to have to I don't want to pay a lot of money for changes I have to make. And then I'm trying to impress myself because I want to make good design too. You know what I'm saying? And so all that is a part of the process of making the magazine itself.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. That's like massive insights, like insider insights into producing a publication, from the design perspective. So I absolutely love that. That you these things, you got them nailed down. Can you just run over like the quantity and the actual like print specs as far as like paper stocks and things like that go, just so I can throw that out there and people can put the visual to the spec?
Yeah. So paper, I don't like glossy. I never did. Fingerprints is sticky.
I'm with you there, bro.
It's just like, yeah, I'm cool off of that. Some of the coding they do, like this kind of like the soft, it's okay. I wanted people to have a tactile experience with Umber. I want you to feel the tooth. I want you to feel, I don't want it to be too heavy to where it's like, it becomes where you can't even turn the pages, because sometimes that's annoying too, right? I want you to feel the pain. I want you to feel, okay, this is something I want to cherish. I want to hold on to. And so, sorry about that. That was my slack.
I didn't even hear it on this side.
Okay, cool, good.
Yeah.
And so I uncoded all day because nothing about Umber is pretentious. I'm not nah, man. I don't need no gloss. You don't need no gloss, right? Because I'm not a glossy person, right? You know what I'm saying? I want you to feel like this is something that is great paper. There's some toothiness to it, right? You know what I'm saying? The cover is a heavier weight. The binding is I like Perfect Bound is great, as long as it's good glue. Pure lay flat, I usually roll with that. And so so that's really sort of like the aesthetic I want. But going forward though, Umber, the goal is Umber to be a hardcover.
Yeah.
The main issue, I want that to be a hardcover because I switched it. Umber used to be called Umber Magazine, but it's not that. It's a graphic journal, right? You know what I'm saying? That's really what it is. And so therefore, I'm treating Umber as an art book, as a coffee table book, versus just magazine that you kind of like you put on the shelves with other magazines. You know what I'm saying? And so, but for me, it's uncoded all day. I gotta do uncoded. You know what I'm saying? And so I can't do glossy.
No, make it rain on uncoded. So last question is sort of related to the production and the magazine itself is the quantity. How many of these are you producing?
Low. This is small batch. For couple reasons. One, up until this point, I'm handling all distribution and fulfillment. So those bad boys come right in the studio, stacked up on these on these shelves. And when you buy a copy of Umber, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Mike Nicholls who's going to pack it up. So I want to make low numbers. Also, too, whatever, I want you to feel like I am 1 out of 1,000 people in the world who have Umber in their hand. Right? That is the intention of Umber. It is a specialty high-end print product, right? Without the pretentiousness of glossy magazines. You know what I'm saying? And so the first issue I did of Umber was 1,000. The second issue of Umber, actually I only did 500 of the second issue. And those sold out in 5 months, right? And so at the time, Umber is sold in 35 places around the world, 3 spots in London, and then most on the West Coast. As far as Seattle and Portland, I have some in Philly and Chicago as well. And the goal is New York and Atlanta and Austin as well. But so I print low quality just so I can maintain the fulfillment, right? Once again, this was just a passion project. Issue 1 was a passion project. Can I just make this thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just do this? And then, okay, all right, issue 1 was cool. Let me do another one. Can I just sell out? Oh, cool, I can sell out. Okay, all right, cool. Let me just make one more, right? You know what I'm saying? And then, all right, cool. Well, I'm on a roll here. Let me just try to make one more magazine during the pandemic. Is this possible? Can I design a print magazine in a pandemic and will people buy it? I don't know. Oh, they will? Cool. All right, bet. What's next, Mike? You just did 4 issues. What are you going to do now? And so it's all so far it's been low volume, right? And the last issue we just printed for this last year, our SAM issue, Sports, Athletics, and Movement issue. We did 3 different covers, heavier covers because the pages went up more. It's 104 pages now, and We did 750. I'm keeping it low because, when I have more of a sustainable distribution model, then I can up those numbers.
Yeah, it's exclusive that way.
Yes. Once again, I want you to feel like, oh, whoa, wait a second. You don't have UMBER? Ha ha! You don't have UMBER? No, that's not right. I'm not gonna say that. But
It adds to the, all print in digital media, in Instagram, billions of people could see that Instagram ad.
Yep.
Right? And it doesn't make it special. There's nothing special about that.
Yep.
But something tactile, a box, a magazine, a booklet, even a greeting card, like that's finite. Like, there's only so many of those in the world, and you have one. So it's not that it's an exclusivity, and it makes it, you only get this if you're special.
Yep.
But what it does is it increases the value.
There you go.
Providing.
There you go. That's really, that's it. You know what I'm saying? And so, and also too, whatever, UMBER, there's no ads, in UMBER. If there's any type of ad representation, there's partnerships through our community. We're going to, next phase of UMBER, we're going to explore more options for advertising and, partnerships and spaces for some sponsored content. But the first 4 issues, there was literally no ads. There was maybe 2 ads once again, but this fits within the theme of that issue. And so this issue was on sports athletics. There was a Black and brown owned running store, a running boutique store, opened up during the pandemic.
Crazy,
right? Physical store. This is not the physical store.
Yep.
And they beautiful people. I met them. Went by the store, and they're like, I had my safe in space release party at their space. Everybody had the mask on. We had different slots for people to come in, so it's not too crowded. We show our press sheets as art. Every time you go to
thank you.
Every time you come to an UMBER release party, we keep our press sheet. I'm going to get them framed. These talk about money. Them bad boys are worth. But here's the thing. I got inspired by Immigrate when they did their last issue of Immigrate in San Francisco. This is like 06. They had this event for the last issue, and I went. No, 07. Excuse me. I went there. Sorry, 09 is when they had it. I went there, and they had their press sheets framed. I'm like, oh, that's not. And that's art right there. That is art. To see the squares of the ink on the side, the hash marks, the targets,
crop marks, you got all the targets. Yeah.
Listen, man, that's art. So for me, layout is an art practice. Me doing UMBER is my art practice. That's what it is. Is my art form. Layout is not. Layout is like coding, right? If you're in design doing these, paragraph styles, these character styles, you know what I'm saying? Like that's coding, straight up. And so that's my art form.
Yeah, and on one of actually, it's funny you say that about the press sheets, because one of the things that I talk about I did this special Christmas gift guide episode where I sort of just go through some things that are really cool for graphic designers and designers who want to get into print. And one of the things I said is through field notes, like the notebooks field notes. Yeah, you could get the designer field notes, and that's always helpful. But here's something real special. On the Field Notes website, they have very limited quantities of press sheets of their covers. And I'm like, you wrap up one of those, you get that framed up on the wall. That is art. It's beautiful. It's just something that most designers don't get to experience, don't get to see. Even when you get to like foil stamping things, if you get those foil stamping dies, you get like dates framed and up on your wall. Like,
oh my God. Listen, I even see the beauty. Some of the coding I do see sometimes, like I'll look at the coding, and if you were to print that out on a very nice oversized print paper, like how the code kind of like how it cascades, and there's just little shapes that are created from how people coat. Even that's beautiful to me, right? Even that's beautiful. But yeah, frame. Listen, that's the next evolution for Umber, like to where it's like, you know, you're gonna you could be buying these press sheets and they're gonna cost you a whole lot of money, but it's gonna be nice framed.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I'm signing it because the press have to sign the press sheets before they go off and make, you know, all these prints of it. And so
Yep. I love it, man.
Yeah, man.
So Mike, I got last couple of questions here for you, and then we'll wrap this up. What advice would you give a designer who is just new to print or wanting to really get started in print design?
Make a zine.
Yeah.
Make something really small that you can print out with little to no money, because, you know, printing is expensive. And you know, and if you're not in the space where you can advertising or you have any sponsors or partnerships with folks, I mean, you can, you know, if you're treating your print as an art craft, you can always probably get funding to different art programs within your community or even nationally. But these artist grants that could definitely support you with that. But I would say just make a zine, right? And so make something that you can print out at Kinko's, or keep saying Kinko's, FedEx office, or whatever little print. Oh, you know what? Don't go there. Go to mom and pop print store.
Find your little local printer.
There you go.
Just chat with them about doing something cool. But that's it, really. One of the best ways to learn is just to start doing.
Yep. Just make that and highlight your community. Start with your community first. Like, start with them first. But I would say, yeah, make a little zine. I don't know how the zine culture is in other places in the world or even in the States. I know in the Bay Area, there's a huge community here in the Bay Area for zine. We have like Zine Fest. I think there's one in San Diego, I believe. So anyway, I would say make a zine. Do that. Get that printed, and you know. But here's the thing, though. When you do make something, if you are passionate about something, let that be the thing that you are designing. I mean, you could do something cool. That's cool too, right? But do something you're passionate in, because you're stepping into a world that there isn't a lot of, like, you know, resources or fanfare outside of geeky designers and print nerds, right? You know what I'm saying? So pick something that you're passionate in and tell a story. And, you know, even if it's, you know, like I said, sometimes it doesn't always have to be a purpose. Sometimes I think that helps sometimes in terms of like what you're doing this for. But make a small zine, be something that if you're passionate about rocks, and just take some pictures of rocks on your phone, you know, put inside a layout with some text and get it printed. Yeah. That's just it. So
that's it. I love that.
Yeah.
So Mike, I want to wrap this up with the Ask the Audience question. I've got this group on Instagram of graphic designers who are eager to learn more about print. It doesn't have to be print related, but what would you want to ask this group of designers?
What do you stand for as a print designer? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you stand for? What do you feel like, you know, you want to show that you have a commitment on? And what is that thing that reflects you? I think nowadays people are really highlighting their values and what they believe in, but here's the thing, not based upon what media is telling you that you should be talking about, not based upon what people say you should be saying or this and that, whatever, but what do you stand for your personal self, and how do you want to reflect that in print design? Right? You know, so how do you put your fingerprint in print? I really want to know, how do you say, okay, this is Dave right here. This little thing you see right here, this vinyl release I'm going to have soon.
That's right.
This is Dave. So how do you, you know, I'm curious to see how designers, or how you would, you know, what form would you take as print media? Are you packaging? Are you a zine? Are you a magazine? Yeah, that's what I would ask. Love it.
Mike, you have reached the end of the Print Design Podcast, man. This has been just an amazing conversation. I never know sort of what direction these conversations are going to go. I do enough research on my guests to know that we got a good fit and we can have a great print conversation here, but I don't know anything about their life story and their journey, their passions. I don't know anything about that. And having this conversation with you and hearing your journey, your story, your passions, and where these things were ignited, man, such an engaging, awesome conversation. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you for having me.